Take a year off, do some music, then I'd go to school. Once the music was bubbling in my blood, there was no turning back.
Getting people to relocate to Northeast Indiana, a part of this team, this culture, this rocket ship that you guys are building.
Whatever you do it really well. Do it beyond reproach so you don't ever have to apologize, and just take the high road in everything you do.
When did you get past the oh, I'm behind? Where did you start to be proud of what you were building? From South Bend to Evansville and everywhere in between, this is Get In, the show focused on the Hoosier State and the incredible stories happening here today. I'm Nate Spengel, founder of Get Indiana, and I will be your host for today's conversation. Today, my guest is Chuck Surack, the founder of Sweetwater Sound, the largest online retailer of musical instruments and pro audio equipment in the U.S. With its home in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Sweetwater is a $1 billion company employing hundreds of Hoosiers that have actually come to Indiana from all walks of life, from Nashville to LA, all across. We're going to get into what the secret sauce was of getting people to move to Fort Wayne, Indiana to be part of Sweetwater. Now, Chuck has become the driving force in Northeast Indiana through the Surack Family Foundation and Surack Enterprises, investing in everything from aviation, healthcare, community development, and so much more. He's known for his entrepreneurship and his deep love for Indiana. He's helped put Fort Wayne on a global map. I'm really excited to talk through the journey of building Sweetwater and what it looks like now as you're, pouring into the Surack Family Foundation, Surack Enterprises. You said over 20 businesses are involved. Chuck, welcome to Get In.
Thank you, Nate. So glad to be here today.
Man, I am pumped up about this one. Obviously, a legend, not just in Fort Wayne, not just in Indiana, across the country. Your journey from VW bus and early recording equipment to building a $1 billion enterprise here in the state of Indiana and recruiting talent from some of the most prestigious universities across the country, from LA and Nashville and the music industry, getting albums recorded in Fort Wayne, Indiana. There's so many stories. This could be like a 10-hour multi-time Joe Rogan episode, but we're going to dive right into it and talk to us about, obviously, you grew up and you started this business kind of from the back of a VW bus. Take us through that moment.
Sure. Probably need to back up a little bit, but I was actually born in Southern Ohio, and my parents brought me to Fort Wayne at age 13, middle school, or junior high as we called it back then. And I was going down the path to be a doctor, but I also loved doing music. And so I went through high school, took all the college prep courses, chemistry and Latin and all of that. But I also was doing lots and lots of music. And immediately after high school, I went on the road as a musician, and I started playing music all over the country. Back in those days, musicians could play 6 nights a week at the various nightclubs and various concert facilities and that sort of thing. And after being on the road for almost 5 years, I decided I wanted to do something a little different. And so during those 5 years, I had gathered some recording equipment. In fact, a lot of times there weren't really recording studios, but they were radio stations. And when I'd go to a new town, we'd go into the local radio station and record a commercial to say we're playing at this restaurant this week or whatever. And so I was always the guy that knew how to use the equipment. I acquired a little bit of equipment while I was on the road and came home, and what am I going to do? I had this beat-up, rusty VW bus that my parents had given me as a junior in high school, and I'd filled that bus, by the way, with 2 gallons of Bondo on the front because my mom had wrecked it. It had headlights from Tractor Supply that looked like big bug eyes, and I painted it with 99-cent cans of blue spray paint from Kmart. And that's what I drove my junior and senior year of high school and on the road for several years.
Wow.
But I came home and I took that bus, and I would pull alongside the school, the church, the nightclub. I'd run 200 feet of microphone cables in, and I would mic up the band, the choir, the preacher, whatever it was. And then I would record them by sitting in the bus with, in those days, a reel-to-reel tape recorder long before we had digital. And I would make those recordings, and then I would take them to the living room of my 12 by 55 mobile home that I lived in. And I would edit those recordings into the right order and maybe, do some sweetening or make them sound a little bit better. And then I'd send those away and have LPs made. And so for your high school band or your junior high choir, we could make albums, and then we'd sell those albums for you. And it was just a really amazing way to start my company.
Wow. I can only imagine, the amount of places you had to pull up next to. I think a lot of times you see today, this huge enterprise, and people can forget about going to, the preacher, the high school band, this, that, the other thing, and just putting in the work there, and how hard it was. It wasn't as easy as it is today. We got set up to record today in about 36 seconds. Shout out to Robert. Thank you. It was so easy, but it's like you had to run 200 feet of microphone cable and do the whole 9 yards. Like that's wild. What I do want to talk about, obviously on the track, you were considering being a doctor and you end up going the path of music. First, what was the moment that you just knew that music was important to you? Like where in your journey did that first, I don't know, spark ignite deep inside?
Well, I started playing saxophone in 5th grade. My father, actually, I wanted to play trombone. My dad says, no, you don't want to play trombone. You want to play saxophone. My dad was a frustrated accordion player.
Why did he want you to play the saxophone?
Well, because saxophone players, he said, got all the girls, got all the solos, And I'm thinking, if my dad really understood, he'd have told me to play guitar. But anyway, so I did saxophone.
So what was the first, like you're sitting there, you want to play trombone, you pick up the alto sax?
Tenor sax.
Tenor sax. Oh,
we went to a pawn shop in Columbus, Ohio, and he bought me a tenor sax. Mm-hmm. I came home to my little town in southern Ohio, and I put the mouthpiece on, and I went to the local music teacher. He was a teacher at the school, but it happened to be on a Sunday afternoon. And I said, look, I can make this sound on a saxophone. And it was the most horrendous duck-sounding thing. And he looks at it and he says, you have your mouthpiece on upside down. So that was my first and frankly only lesson I ever had. I never had a private lesson on instruments.
Right. So you just had to get the mouthpiece position. How'd you learn?
Well, you learn in school with your band director and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I never took private lessons.
Wow.
And I taught myself. And those days we listened to a lot of records. There wasn't YouTube. There wasn't all the tools that you have today to learn, but I would read a lot and I would listen to lots of records.
So you were playing the saxophone, but what were you listening? Like what was in your headphones, or like what were the records you were listening to?
Well, it would be the standard jazz guys like John Coltrane, and one of my favorites is a guy named Cannonball Adderley, and then probably my favorite, which not everybody knows today, is a guy named Boots Randolph. Boots Randolph had a big hit in 1961 called Yakety Sax. Yakety Sax is that humorous sort of song that eventually became the Benny Hill theme song. And so anytime you see somebody roll down the hill or something, that's the Yakety Sax tune.
Yakety Sax. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to put that on the list to
It's
check
a 2 minute and 31 second, just humorous, very fast song. And Boots not only played that song, but he played on thousands and thousands of other albums, 50 of his own albums. He did the big sax solo in Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree with Brenda Lee. That's Boots Randolph. Yeah, so he was
that's a good one.
Yeah, he was my friend and idol through the years. A lot of fun.
That's like the da 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 da. Yeah. Oh wow, that's a fire saxophone solo. Yep. All right, so you then get to the point. So music becomes such a staple part of who you are.
Yep.
And you make this decision to forego college.
So I thought I would we didn't call it a gap year back then, but I'd take a year off, do some music, then I'd go to school. But once the music was bubbling in my blood, there was no turning back.
What was that conversation with your family? Like, were your parents well off? Did you guys grow up? Like, what did your parents do for work?
My dad was a chemical engineer, and I'm one of 5. I'm the oldest of 5, so my mom stayed home as a home worker and probably did the harder of the 2 jobs.
5 kids, absolutely.
Yeah. No, they were relatively supportive. They didn't understand. A lot of people didn't understand. In fact, I was probably well into my 30s when people quit asking me when I was going to get a real job.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And now it's like, can I have a job?
No, wait, so you leave home you're probably, what, 18?
18, yep.
And you start going on the road. And I think when you're young, you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, like you're playing at some clubs and I'm like, you're not even 21 yet, right? Like you're in there playing in the band. It's like, okay, it's fun. At what point, you did it for 5 years. At the end of that, was it kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? Like,
that's exactly right. It was living out of suitcases, and usually you'd get free room and board and not a lot of money. And I just knew I had higher aspirations than that.
Yeah. Did your parents ever try to push you to go back to college?
No, but I will tell you, my grandfather, when he worked at General Electric his whole life, which was a big, big employer in Fort Wayne. His son worked at General Electric. All my family members worked at General Electric one time or another. And he came home so proud one day. He says, Chuck, I've got you in the GE Tool and Die program, which is a pretty prestigious thing, and you'd have been set for life. And it was really hard to tell my grandfather that I didn't want to do that, and I thought music was in my future. Kind of broke his heart for a while, but he turned around and became my biggest fan.
How old were you when you had to tell him?
22, 23.
And he's like, okay, you've had your fun.
Yeah, exactly.
You've traveled the country. You've played your music. Like, it's time to hang it up and come get a real job.
Yep.
Wow. And so you had to tell him no.
Yes.
Wow. that has to be hard. You're 22 and to like let down someone. I mean, especially at the time, what year would that have been when you were 22?
1979, 80.
Like, you're in the 70s, like early 80s, and you're like, I don't know, like this is stable. This is like I feel like nowadays like entrepreneurship is a little more celebrated and like, oh yeah, like follow your passion. But it's like this is 1980. Yeah. They're not like telling you. They're like, hey, put a paycheck, like build a family, like get a white picket fence and like do your thing.
Entrepreneurship was not even a word in the late 70s.
No. Oh my gosh. So you start off by going around and recording with your beat up bondoed bus.
Yep.
And then how long did it take for you to start getting some traction within this business?
Sure. So I did that for a couple of years with the bus and literally the living room of my mobile home. And finally, at about 1981, 82, a couple of years later, I bought my first little house on the west side of Fort Wayne, 1,000 square foot house, and I built a recording studio off the end of it, a 2-car garage looking space, but it was a recording studio. And for the first time, I could now have customers come to me, as well as I could still go out on location. But I started getting lots of advertising agencies that would come. Back in those days, there were a lot of jingles on the radio. And so we became the king of doing jingles and had lots and lots of agencies that would use us to write music for them. And then also, people would come in and do their initial solo artists or vanity albums, that sort of thing.
Wow. The Jingle King of Fort Wayne. That was you, right?
I guess whatever that title is, yes.
Like, how were you learning that this was a business and a market that you could go after?
I didn't know any better. I just didn't know any better. And I've never been driven by money. My goal was always just to do a great job and help people and help people's music sound better. And that was my goal.
How were you learning about how to help make their music sound better?
Reading, listening. I was a huge listener. There's some very famous producers and engineers, Al Schmidt, Bruce Swedien, all these old guys that just recorded the greatest of greatest music.
Wow. Okay. So you have this recording studio off the side of your 1,000-foot square house.
Exactly.
You still have the bus. Bus is still going strong at that point?
I don't know about strong. VW buses never go strong.
Okay. But you're still, so you're rocking and rolling, but is it just you?
It is just me for several years.
Where was the point where you hired your first employee?
1983, 84, I realized I was burning the midnight oil. I should back up. There was a short period when I came back after being on the road that I worked for Hobart Food Equipment, and I would service microwave ovens and dishwasher control system, electronic stuff.
Yeah.
But I was doing that all day from like 7:30 to 4:30, and then from 4:30 till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd be recording. And eventually, I was recording so much, and I was having a hard time getting up in the morning to do the day job. And there's where my dad really said, you need to turn this into a real business. And I said, but Dad, I have a paycheck every 2 weeks. And he's the one that encouraged me to move on. And so I did. I quit my job at Hobart, and recording just took off from that point.
When you originally set out, did you want to be like a famous touring musician?
I don't know if I ever thought I wanted to be famous. Maybe because I was self-taught. I knew I wasn't quite of that musical level. I could play well enough to fool people, but I wasn't going to be that extraordinary level.
When you think about what...
I really like the back end. I like producing artists. I like making their music sound better. I had so many artists that would come in that frankly shouldn't have been in the recording studio, but I could help them sound better.
Did they ever pull up to the house and just be like, where the heck am I? Like, I'm going into this guy's like home recording studio.
Oh, yes.
So you bring in like a big agency, like big wig, and you're like, oh yeah, right here, like past the living room and it's over in the corner.
That's how it worked.
That's so awesome. Yeah. I love it. Well, you talked about, okay, you're self-taught, so you would not say you had the extraordinary musical talent, but here you are many years later, so many accolades and impressive things you've done. What would you say that you were or are extraordinary at that's helped set you apart on this path to success?
I am good with people, so networking is always just incredible. Always being willing to say yes. I didn't use the word no very often. In fact, I always say that anything's possible and failure's not an option. So I never gave up. And I think that goes back to my roots as a Boy Scout. Scouts aren't so popular today, but when I grew up, almost everybody was a Boy Scout. And a Boy Scout learns to be trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, clean, brave, and reverent. Amazing principles to live by personally.
Yeah.
Also great to live by professionally.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I think I was coming up, I was part of Cub Scouts. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to high school, our Boy Scout troop got dissolved because there was not enough interest.
Sure.
But yeah, you talk about learning all of these things at a young age. And I think a lot of people like hear it, but do they really put it into practice? And when you do put those, I mean, you still remember the motto.
Scout Law, yeah.
Yeah, the Scout Law to today. That's incredible. So things start to advance. You hang up the job at Hobart and you go all in on recording. So then, you're no longer 7 to 4:30 doing something else. You're all in on recording. How quickly do you start to see things grow? Like, is this like oh man, one day it's just an overnight success and everyone wants to get everything recorded through you? Or how did that journey go?
It's a little both. I mean, on the one hand, it's slow. The money was never there, but I didn't do it for the money, as I said. But it was growing and we were very popular. And what really changed my business is 1983, I got invited to go to the NAMM show. NAMM stands for National Association of Music Merchants. And that show happened to be in Chicago. And so a friend of mine in town owned a local piano organ store. He says, "You want to go to the NAMM show?" And I asked, "What is it?" He tells me, and I said, "Sure, I'll go with you." And so I go to Chicago, and I saw a prototype of a music instrument called the Kurzweil K250. And it was a room bigger than this room, just full of computer memory. And what it could do is play back digital recordings of other instruments. So when you played its 88-note keyboard, it could play a 9-foot grand piano or a 50-voice choir or a 45-piece string section. And I thought, well, how cool is that? And I thought, well, if I bought one of those for my own studio, I could make my customers' music sound better. At the end of every recording session, I could say, do you want to hear it with the string section? Do you want to hear it with an upright bass? And so I bought one. I bought serial number 32, which is a pretty early machine. It was very expensive at the time, but I brought it back to Fort Wayne.
How much is expensive?
That was about $20,000 back then.
How did you have $20,000?
Well, I had a Yamaha grand piano, and I sold that because this had a built-in 9-foot recording of a grand piano, which, by the way, today, we can do that on our iPads and, iPhones and all, but sampling in the mid 80s like that was just unheard of.
So you had a 9-foot Yamaha grand piano.
I had a 7-foot in my studio.
Oh, 7-foot.
And I traded it in, or I sold it and got about $10,000, and I scrapped the rest of the money together to buy this synthesizer, the Kurzweil K250.
So you went all in.
All in.
Wow. How did you just had a gut feeling that this would be great?
Yeah, I just knew listening to it. It had about 40 different sounds in it, and I could use those at my recording sessions.
Yeah. And today you think of like a keyboard, you know, like your iPad does this, like, all the things. But this is what year?
1983.
In 1983, you see this, and you sell your current piano.
Yep.
And you go all in on the Kurzweil K250?
Yes.
Wow.
So
how long did it take to get it to Fort Wayne?
I don't know, next 6 months or so it showed up. Interesting backstory on the K250. There used to be a machine that you could put books in, and it would read the books aloud. And Stevie Wonder had several of these machines, and they were about $50,000. And again, this is before all the technology we have today. But it was designed by a guy named Ray Kurzweil, a futurist who does a lot of stuff. And Ray and Stevie were the same age. And one day Stevie just happened to mention to him, I wish I had an instrument that played all the sounds of an orchestra. Ray says, well, go buy one. And Stevie says, no, there's synthesizers, there's electric pianos, there's organs, but there's nothing that really plays back recordings or real instruments. And so Ray Kurzweil and a few of his MIT buddies built this instrument. And it was all based on having a lot of computer memory. And so it really was an inspiration by Stevie Wonder what got that instrument off the ground.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you got serial number 32.
Yep.
Here's a question. You sell this piano. What happens in the 6 months in your studio while you're waiting for your machine?
I don't really remember, but probably we did more guitar music than piano music. I don't know.
There you go. So it comes
to the other thing about an acoustic piano, and I love the sound of a great acoustic piano, but they're always in a state of going out of tune. I mean, every time you play a note or play a chord, it starts to drift out of tune. The digital piano is perfect all the time.
Did you ever get pushback from people like, no, I'd rather have the original?
Oh, sure. And, and if you really have a perfectly tuned, big 7-foot, 9-foot concert grand piano, that's still going to sound better. But most people's pianos are not in that condition, so the digital piano is going to sound better.
Yeah. So you get this Kurzweil K250, and this is what really starts to send you off on this track, because you now can do incredible recordings for your customers.
I can add a couple more hours of productivity at the end of a session. Would you like to hear your music with that upright bass or with the piano or whatever? I also got hired to go all around the state of Indiana to other recording studios. So I would go to Anderson or the Gaither studio, or down here to Indianapolis to other studios, and I would play the Kurzweil, or maybe they'd have a musician that would use my Kurzweil. It was very unique. It was, it was the first one in the state of Indiana, so it was pretty rare. And as I did that, I could also I learned how to record my own sounds into it. It had a Motorola 68,000 microprocessor chip in it, the same chip that was in the original Mac 128, Mac 512, Mac Plus. And you could record your own sounds into it and then store those sounds off to the Macintosh. And so I started making my own sounds. And that's where the company really started. When I started making these sounds, I wanted to find other Kurzweil owners around the country that had machines. And so it was a brotherhood. I could call up and go, wow, you have a Kurzweil, I have one too. And you could find their names and what equipment they had. And there was a magazine called Mix, and it listed recording studios all over the country and what equipment they used, what tape recorders, what mixers, and if they happened to have a Kurzweil or a Synclavier or other major instruments. And I would just call up as a fellow Kurzweil owner and offer to trade sounds with them. Well, I quickly found out that most of these people weren't really technical. They were just musicians playing it, and they didn't have their own sounds, but they wanted my sounds. So before long, Stevie Wonder's getting my sounds, and Kenny Rogers, and Dolly Parton, and Bob James, and Lionel, all these famous musicians.
No way.
Oh yeah, it was wild. And
hold on,
okay.
we can't gloss over that. So you find out that you can record your own. So what was your breakthrough aha moment that you could record a sound into your Kurzweil?
Well, one thing I recorded right away was my saxophone, because I could play it, and I could play it well enough to record it. And but there were lots of instruments.
So how would you do? You have to just like play all the notes or something, or
you would play. It gets complicated, but you would play every third or fourth note, and then that was one of the beauties of this instrument. The computer, which is what this Kurzweil was, could interpolate or slow down or speed up the notes to fill in the notes. So you might record a C and a G. You don't have to worry about the notes, the D, E, F between. It would either speed up or slow down to play those notes for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you start to record your saxophone and these other sounds, and you're kind of like, that becomes like the Trojan horse sales thing, right? You're like, hey, do you have any sounds you guys want to trade,
Exactly.
like playing cards? They're like, wait, you have sounds? Like, what kind of sounds do you have? You're like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And so then, look, was there a crazy story where someone, a famous individual, famous musician, famous artist, calls you up and asks you for a sound?
There were many, but probably my favorite, just because I was such a fanboy of Stevie Wonder, to have Stevlin Morris, his real name, call you up and say he wants some really great brass. And so I called a trumpet player friend of mine, a trombone player, and myself on the sax, and the three of us recorded a really great brass section. I sent it to Stevie's engineer, and next thing you know, I've got credits on his Characters album. It wasn't Songs in the Key of Life or one of his big albums, but it was still credits on his Characters album.
And how did you send it to them? Like today we'd put it into iCloud or
I think it was FedEx. Yeah,
You FedEx like
a disc, couple discs, floppy discs.
That's crazy. Yeah. I guess imagine picking up the phone and he says, "Hey, it's Stevie Wonder."
No, he says it's Stevlin Morris, and I'm thinking, well, who's that?
That's great.
Yeah.
I just imagine like that's so cool, and that has to feel like, okay, at this point, how old are you?
Oh, mid-20s.
Like, it has to feel like, okay, I'm starting to get some traction here.
No, I still thought I was really never going to make it, really behind it. Yeah.
Wow. So did you battle with that of like how close were you to just scrapping it and saying, I'll just go to GE or I'll go
failure is never an option, but you did feel inferior. I mean, everyone around me just said, why Fort Wayne, Indiana? A recording studio has to be in Nashville, has to be in LA, has to be in New York. All my professional friends, whether it's accountants and lawyers, they didn't understand my business. And I probably got frustrated, actually. And as I think back today, it was, I can't blame them for not understanding it was my dream, my aspiration, not theirs.
Was it lonely?
It was very lonely, very lonely. Long hours and very lonely.
Because, I mean, the way you talk about things like Boy Scouts and the way you talk about the brotherhood of Kurzweil owners, like there wasn't, I'm assuming there wasn't, you said the first one in Indiana, how long until someone else near you came around that you could just like pal with and talk about, I don't know, kind of like nerd out about recording stuff?
Well, I did start a recording club, not so much necessarily around the Kurzweil, but just around recording in general. Home recording was just starting to take off, and I was ahead of most of the people around me. So I started a club. We met once a month at the local library and that sort of thing.
How much of this early kind of momentum, even if at the time it did not feel like, if it felt like you were behind, how much of this early momentum do you credit to just being like hyper fixated on being a technical specialist?
that was part of it. And I really think I was at the right place at the right time as the whole revolution went from analog recording to eventually digital. I was just right there. And I was always into technology. So I got so busy copying sounds for my friends, I finally said enough's enough. And I put out a newsletter and had about 300 of my sounds on it called the Sweetwater Sampling Network. And I sent it to friends all over the country going, if you want any of these sounds, I'll copy the discs for you for $5 a piece, which I think the discs were probably a couple bucks a piece. But I would be running a recording studio, and on the right side, I would be multitasking and copying discs. In those days, to copy a disc on a Macintosh took about 50 disc swaps because there wasn't a hard drive or anything, but you'd put a disc in, pull it out, put a disc in, and it would 50 times to make a copy of a disc. But I'm charging $5 a disc, And I became friends with the Kurzweil rep. He was actually from southern Indiana. He was down in Santa Claus. And he'd come to see me and to get my sounds to take to other dealers around the country. One day I started asking him, I said, I have a friend out in California who wants to upgrade his Kurzweil. And he says, well, why don't you sell him the parts? I said, nah, I'm too busy running my recording studio. But the Kurzweil was a works in a drawer. You could take 3 screws out, pull the drawer out, and you could put other memory chips in. And I kept getting these sort of calls from my friends that I was giving sounds to. And one day he said, look, why don't you really become a Kurzweil parts dealer? I can set you up to be a dealer. And I said, well, I don't know. I got all these guys. I'm just busy running the recording. I kind of pushed it off. And finally, I agreed to become a Kurzweil parts dealer. It was in the fall, and I learned, which I didn't know anything about business at that time, or retail business anyway, but I learned at the end of their years, or specifically when they had fiscal quarters that were important, there sometimes were deals or sales. And so he came to me in November, and he says, look, anything that you can sell between now and the end of the year, there's an extra 40% discount. I said, wow, okay. So I sent a newsletter out that was dot matrix printed. I didn't even have a laser printer yet. And it said, I have these sound blocks for your Kurzweil if you're interested. And if you need help, I'll help you put them in, that sort of thing. So through the month of November and December, I sent out this newsletter to about 300 friends.
Mailed it?
Mailed it, yeah. There was no email back. It was totally mailed. But it was dot matrix, and I described these sound blocks that you could put in your machine. And next thing you know, 2 days before Christmas, my rep calls me. He says, hey, how are you doing on those orders? I said, I don't know. I'm really busy doing Christmas recordings. I've got a bunch of envelopes here and checks and all that. And he says, well, I really need these orders in by the end of the year. I said, I know, but I'm busy running my recording studio. And he says, well, he called me the day after Christmas then. And he says, well, how are you doing on this? I need these by the 31st. And I said, I don't know. I'm just really slammed getting some Christmas music out. And he says, well, roughly how many? I said, I don't know, $200,000. And he says, well, you need to have all the money. I said, yeah, I do. I have all the money. People have already paid me with checks in advance. And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah. He says, I'll come up and help you count it. So he drove up from Santa Claus, Indiana to Fort Wayne. We counted. My first order was just under $300,000 of Kurzweil parts. And full margin, plus a 40% discount. So it was a great moneymaker. I made more money selling those Kurzweil parts in 6 weeks than I did all year as a recording studio. And so in January, the parts start coming in. I call my friends and ship some of them. Some of them, they paid me to fly to their location and to put the parts in. And it just really took off in a big way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that classic thing of you can't see the forest through the trees because you're right there. I don't know, like a couple $100,000. You're like, wait a second, a couple $100,000 is crazy.
I literally was handwriting the checks and the amount on a piece of paper. We didn't have Excel or anything back then. But to add it up, they did it the manual, analog way.
Just under $300,000. What year is this?
1985.
I don't know what the equivalent to today
That's a lot of
is.
money.
That's a lot of money in 6 weeks. That's like the first ever like Black Friday, like holiday sale. Holy
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So you crush. And did this ends up like? Do you start to see like, okay, this is no?
I'm so naive. I still don't really get it. I want to go back and start doing my recording studio in January, February, and March. Yeah. But I have helped my friends install these upgrades. I put them in my own machines.
This is an interesting piece. Every single one of these people that you're referring to, who are your customers, but you're in this stage, you're referring to them as your friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how much of this success and the trust to collect almost $300,000 in checks through the mail, through your 300-ish person newsletter, like that comes from the fact that you built relationships.
Yeah, and think about it. It was pre-mail order, pre-internet. But it was a relationship that I had with each one of those people. And the bigger music stores quit selling this instrument because there were now newer, cheaper, not as good, but less expensive instruments to sell. And so being a boutique high-end product, those people sought me out as the way I sought them out, actually.
How would you give advice to today's entrepreneurs about being everything to everyone versus a specialist for a boutique high-end product?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've seen both sides of it. I started very specialized, and today you could say Sweetwater sells everything to everybody. But I just think whatever you do it really well. Do it beyond reproach so you don't ever have to apologize. So you can always put your head on your pillow at night and just take the high road in everything you do. And whether it's a boutique thing like I started or mass like we do today.
Yeah. So you still go back for 3 more months of recording.
Well, I don't know. I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but I did. I continued to record for several years. But one day I get a call from a friend of mine down in Louisiana, and he says, Chuck, I understand you can do sheet music on the computer. I said, yeah, I know how to do that. I now have a personal computer, and I had written myself a cassette labeling program so I could spit out 50 cassette labels all at once. And I had sheet music program that I could do, and so I became a dealer for that sheet music and the interface that you needed to plug into your Macintosh. And so I sold him that. And then I started getting more and more calls. And then I had customers that wanted to buy second and third Kurzweils, which is wild because the basic machine was about 20 grand and you could put another 20 grand of options in it. And so next thing you know, Stevie Wonder wants a second and third. And Kenny Rogers, at the point when Kenny Rogers quit touring, he had 14 Kurzweils that he carried on the road. This was not that many years ago, but he was reproducing 40 years of his hits. And he'd have 4 keyboard players on stage. They'd each have 2. They'd have one in the green room, a couple on the buses and that sort of thing. Paul Schaefer from David Letterman had one until they went off the air, I guess about 10 years ago now or so. And so they were very, very popular for successful musicians.
What made them so different? Obviously, I don't know, however many years ago David Letterman, you could have gotten a keyboard or whatever. Why would you continue to use a Kurzweil?
With the same philosophy that I had. It was really designed beyond reproach. It was an 88-note wooden keyboard like a piano, but it had the greatest sounds recorded in it. Other instruments kind of did inferior sounds, but this sounded like a real piano. It sounded like a real string section. And Kurzweil spared no expense when they did those recording sessions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah. So things started, and you start to just kind of get these other, almost like mini licenses or franchises of different things.
Dealerships.
Yeah. So where do you start to bring on more employees, and where does this whole thing come together at a point to become Sweetwater? And you started talking, you kind of glazed over this, but where did Sweetwater, why did that name come about?
That's a story I haven't told very often.
Yeah.
So I'm out in the country in my mobile home, and I move into the city with that first 1,000 square foot house, and I needed a name where people could find me. I wanted to put a little sign by the road. One of the few things that I have done in my professional life that wasn't quite by the book is the property wasn't zoned commercially. It was right at my next property over was commercial, but I was still residential, and I needed a sign that customers could find me, but it would also not raise the ire of the local zoning officials. Well, out in the country, there are a lot of farms that have, Rolling Meadow Estates, Steve's Acreage, Bill's Barn, whatever. And so I wanted a name that people could find me. And up until then, for a few years, I operated as C&B Audio. And I knew I didn't want Chuck and my first wife, Brenda, in the name. Not that we were a problem at that point, but I just knew I didn't want my name in it personally. And our property that we had a couple acres of land. I had a little creek in the backyard. I said, water, that's kind of sweet. So I put that on a list and a bunch of other names and eventually chose Sweetwater. So I've asked every marketing person who's ever worked for me to come up with a better story, but that's the truth and the on. So a little wooden sign by the road, it says Sweetwater.
And so it became named Sweetwater because you wanted to not get picked up by the local zoning. You're like, oh yeah, Sweetwater, that's hilarious.
That's sweet.
Yeah. That's so funny because it's if you would have put, audio studio, blah, blah, blah. They're like, yeah, nope, you're not allowed to operate that here, buddy. But
exactly.
It's Sweetwater Estates back there. There you go. Wow. And to still stick today, that was in the early 80s. And here we are, oh my gosh, 40-something years later.
It's now been, it'll be 47 years in January.
We're approaching 47 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So one more thing on the path that I sort of left out. During that 85 to about 1990, when I got that call about sheet music, myself and a friend, we reverse engineered how the Kurzweil worked. And so we designed new sounds. Not only were in software, but also in ROM or memory chips. We wrote new software that would work on the Macintosh, so when you would edit it, you could actually visually see on the screen the sound wave or what you were doing. I made the machine talk. So for blind people, again, it was designed for Stevie Wonder, but so it was a very tactile, a lot of buttons and switches. But there were still things that the little software window would show. I made that talk out loud. And so I became, I hate to use this word, but kind of an expert around the world as knowing the Kurzweil probably as well as anybody by reverse engineering it. And that's opened a lot of doors, and that's what caused those customers to trust me.
Wow. Yeah. I do think, there is such a power in one, you just became fixated on the Kurzweil, becoming the absolute expert. And you talk about being a little bit lucky of you happened to go to this show at the right place at the right time, sell the farm and put it all in the Kurzweil. And the Kurzweil ends up being a great instrument for the future of recording.
Absolutely.
Wow.
On a side note, I met a guy about a year ago, and he has now reverse engineered the Kurzweil to a whole new level with all new chips he's designing in it and taking it to another thing. So as a side fun project, I'm kind of reviewing and redoing all that again. Not that it'll be a commercial thing, but it'll make it still modern,
Well, so this is interesting because today Sweetwater is a global player in the music, the audio space, instruments, all the things. But to think that this all started basically really took off because you became an expert in the Kurzweil K250. That's wild. I mean, and in the moment, right? When did you get past the I'm behind, blah, 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 all that piece? Where did you start to be proud of what you were building?
I've probably been proud more of what I've built, but more proud about the employees and being able to help others. But in 1990, I moved into my first real commercial building. I had 5 employees at that point, moved in. They weren't now operating out of my house anymore. It was a commercial building. And we had more and more customers calling, not just for music software, but now recording equipment. So I became a dealer for Tascam and Fostex recording equipment, and then other keyboards and synthesizers, and really technology for a long time. And we quickly grew from the 5 employees. The next year we had about 20 employees. And we were at that location for 17 years. And by the time we moved out, we had 200 employees. And
where were you finding these employees?
Word of mouth and
word of mouth within Northeast Indiana, or word of mouth within the music industry?
Both. And everything from, I think about the second or third employee there. Well, the second one was from Fort Wayne, but the third or fourth, I guess. One was a fellow computer guy, a computer nerd like me that I had met, and we would go to Macworld trade shows. And I remember one day very clearly, and I said, John, you seem to like this better than what you do, and why don't you come work for me? And he scoffed, because at that time he had a 40-person HVAC company, and he was from Delaware. And he said, are you serious? I said, yeah, I think it'd be great to have you come work for me. His wife was a piano player, and she was a customer. That's how I met him. And he went home and thought about it and sold his business and moved his wife and his 2 little children out to Indiana. And, he became my best friend. And for 30 years, we worked together until he retired just a couple of years ago.
Oh, man.
Another employee.
Lifelong Indiana. Was he lifelong in Indiana?
Well, for 30 some years, yeah. Wow. He was born in Delaware, and then the next 30 years there, and now he's down in Florida. Another fellow was working down in Jeffersonville, Indiana. And a manufacturer's rep said, hey, there's this new store starting in Fort Wayne, and they're pretty successful. You ought to go talk to them. So the guy comes up, I talk to him, I kind of throw out my vision. It was not near as big as it ended up being, but cast my vision and showed him how I was into technology and all that. So he quit the music store that he was working at and came to work for me. And it just story after story like that. And of course, as the company got bigger, it became easier and easier to attract people.
Yeah, I think that is a piece of what makes Sweetwater so special today, even. So all of our gear in here from Sweetwater. So when you order, you're going to get a call from a real human being.
Absolutely.
And within, I don't even a really quick amount of time. Honestly, to the point where I'm oh my gosh, what's going on? You're a little bit alarmed because it's so
different.
It's so non-traditional.
Right.
But then once you get into the swing and learn that this is just your Sweetwater rep, this is how it goes. But you guys are able to attract talent from Nashville, from LA. Even there, early on, your third employee was from Delaware and then Jeffersonville. This has always been a secret sauce to Sweetwater. Getting people to relocate to Northeast Indiana to be a part of this team, this culture, and this just rocket ship that you guys are building. What would you say was the key to that? Like, how did you get people to leave, to sell their company, move their families, and come join this crazy company?
Well, and the genesis of it was what I did, developing those relationships with Stevie Wonder and Kenny Rogers, but also lots of people that you didn't know their names, but developed relationships. And as my company grew and I couldn't handle any more of those relationships, I needed people to help me with the relationships. So that's how I got my first few employees. But casting the vision that we were growing and on the move, and this would be a cool thing to do is what it really was.
Were people coming from around the country to buy at your store, or were you shipping stuff? Like, how did that work?
Yeah, everything pretty much was mail order. Mail order had started to happen by then. We had a very small 12 by 12 warehouse for quite a while until we built a bigger one and a bigger one. 12 by 12. It was actually a one-car garage is what our first warehouse was. In fact, UPS and FedEx would come in the daytime, and until we shipped out today's orders, we couldn't put the stuff away. We'd leave their stuff sitting outside until we shipped today's orders out.
Oh, my gosh.
Pretty modest.
As you think back through, oh, man. So Sweetwater's going on 47 years. Yep. As you think back through, the last 47 years, where were the moments where you felt the most proud? Not necessarily of your own accomplishments or anything that you had built, of just like where you took a step back and you looked around at this and you said, "Oh my gosh, like this is incredible. This is amazing. How did I get so lucky?"
I feel like I've been lucky my whole life. Just being able to have a job where I can help others, and I've never had to worry about money, but I also never, as I said, driven by money. But it was in the late 90s, I started to go, this thing might be working. By then I probably had 50 or 75 employees. But I'm very thankful. I've never not paid an employee. I've never not paid a vendor. I've always tried to do all that professionally and on time. If you're going to do it, you got to do it the right way.
And I totally agree. I think that's something that's special largely about Indiana. I would say like the reputation across the Hoosier State matters to people.
Absolutely.
We had Jeff Smolian on, this is probably 18 months ago, and he said, you can't be a bad guy in Indiana because the whole state will know in 30 minutes. It's like so true, right? Like, I'm sure as you were growing, you get to 75, you get to 100 employees, I'm sure like you got calls from Nashville saying, hey, why don't we have a Sweetwater here? I'm sure you got calls from LA. Why don't we have a Sweetwater here? Was there ever a thought to, or were you ever pulled to move Sweetwater from Fort Wayne?
I was never pulled to move Sweetwater from Fort Wayne. We did try a few satellite stores. We had a Chicago store for a while, and we had a Nashville store. But there was just something about having us all under one roof and staying very focused, and lots of vendors coming in and training our people all the time. It kept our knife really, really sharp, which caused us to have a great advantage compared to other competitors. So I don't envision us ever opening stores. That's not our model. We did open a new distribution center or warehouse out in Arizona about 2 years ago. That allows us to serve our West Coast customers faster and that sort of thing.
I mean, because people talk about, everyone's like, Amazon is like, which Amazon is very fast. Like,
Sure.
It's crazy that I can order something and get it by tonight. Like, that's nuts. But like, I'll order something on your site, and if it's before a specific time, it'll come from Fort Wayne to Indianapolis tomorrow. I don't know what the time cutoff is, but it's great. Like, it's really, really fast. And it comes with a couple pieces of candy. Like, you can't be. Actually, we have one of the little like gift bag, or one of the little cutouts right there.
I see it. Yep.
Yeah, that's from our last order. Come on. That's just so awesome. And I think that it's interesting that the model was largely just based out of Fort Wayne. It wasn't there's other huge audio retailers that have gone with big footprints and strip malls all across the country, and that can work at times, but I'm sure for growth in your perspective, having the centralized hub really helped.
Absolutely. There are so many advantages to being in Indiana. Cost of living, of course, homes were very affordable. I could tell someone in LA, yeah, that deposit you put on a house out there, that'll buy the whole house in Indiana. It's a great quality place to raise your family. There's just so many advantages here.
As you were growing, did you feel supported by the local community?
Once we had enough size and scale, yes, we did have credibility. Yeah. That's been my whole professional life, just always fighting for credibility. I didn't go to college, so I'd sit in business meetings, sometimes maybe thinking I wasn't the most educated in the room. And as the company grew, we didn't quite have the background that other companies might have. But over time, it flipped around, and we have a fair amount of credibility today.
I would agree. Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is interesting. So talk to us about what the current life of Chuck looks like. I believe you're not as active in Sweetwater today.
Yeah, so 4 years ago, this last month, it's a long, complicated story because of estate taxes and all that, but we decided to sell a majority of Sweetwater. Great firm that owns it. Now, my wife and I still own a large piece. In fact, we're the largest individual shareholder. But we sold the majority to a capital firm out on the East Coast, and they've been great. And nothing's changed. It looks exactly the same to customers, and it will forever. I mean, that was one of my goals.
Yeah. Was that a hard...
Oh.
I mean, I know it was hard. I'm not even going to ask the question.
But it was really hard, and I still miss it every day. I am there every couple of weeks. I'm chairman of the board. I go in pretty regularly and help. I did a meeting last week to help the employees.
Like, what was that day? Like, you signed some paperwork, and then you have
to... Signed a lot of paperwork.
Signed a lot of paperwork, and then you have to communicate this, that hey, and I think a lot of times, whether right, wrong, or indifferent, firms and buyouts and that thing can get bad raps because there's a lot of, negative side to this. This seems to be 4 years in, like you're having a great experience with that, and Sweetwater continues to grow and all good things there. But take us through what you were feeling as you walk out of Sweetwater as no longer the majority owner and eventually giving up the CEO role.
Yeah, it was hard, and it is hard. It was my baby. But the way I finally rationalized it is that I knew I couldn't be on this earth forever, and I want to make sure that it does continue forever. So we put really good people in charge. And one of the goals when we were looking, I didn't need to sell. We had no debt. I didn't owe to anybody. So I got to choose who we went with as much as they got to choose us. So I interviewed them as hard as they interviewed, and eventually chose some partners that understood the culture and the quality of Sweetwater, and I didn't want to see it destroyed. And I put some very specific pillars in place to the way our process works, to respect our leadership, to continue to donate in Fort Wayne, and things that were really important to me. Now, I can't guarantee they will always do that, but I told them it was really important. And I got to tell you, 4 years later, they've done 100% what they said they would do, and it's been a great relationship. I'm just thrilled with it.
Yeah, I would encourage people to go back and listen to our episode with Mike Clem, the current CEO of Sweetwater. He does a great job of kind of laying out a piece of the journey from the other side, like, telling your story a little bit from their perspective. And yeah, he's taken over leadership for, the last 4 years or so. And it does seem like Sweetwater still very active in Fort Wayne, still doing a ton up there, and still providing incredible customer service, which is like... If I had to, there's a lot of things, obviously being an expert on the Caswell, like all those things, but today being known as like number one in customer experience, customer service, like that's what I would say is synonymous with
You were right on the money. And it doesn't matter what we're selling. We just want to be really, really good at it. And as long as we do that, we're not worried about Amazon. We're not worried about people, biting at our ankles. We're just going to do a great job at what we do. And frankly, I hope the competition does a great job at what they do.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, right. You guys be good too.
Yeah.
So talk me through what life looks like. You sell a majority stake of your very, very large enterprise. You live in Northeast Indiana still, like all year round?
Yeah.
All year round in Northeast Indiana. You could do anything. You could play golf every day. You could take up pickleball. Like, what gets you up in the morning?
Well, there's lots of things that get me up. But, when I did sell, I already had a bunch of other businesses. And we've continued to grow those, foster those. We've started some new things. Today I have more than 20 other businesses. And I've good people running them, good managers and all that, a president of our company. But what probably motivates me the most right now is what we started last fall. It was a couple-year project. We took an old 100-year-old building in Fort Wayne and completely gutted it, remodeled it, and we made a 40,000 square foot space for people to take music lessons, regardless of their family's ability to pay. And it's called Pearl Street Arts. And so we went to Fort Wayne Community Schools, which is the largest school system in the state of Indiana, larger than the ones down here even. And we went to the music teachers and all the folks and said, if you have students that want to play an instrument, we want to give them lessons regardless of their family's ability to pay. And so we hoped for 100 kids. We ended up with 500 that signed up, and we're just now starting our second season. But I think when I fast forward, that'll be my legacy. That's what I'm most excited about, watching these young people have opportunities that they maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. And I don't expect them to become professional musicians. Maybe a few will, but they may become leaders. They may become teachers. They may become entrepreneurs. And we're teaching them entrepreneurship and business and a bunch of other things, as well as music lessons.
That is incredible.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And this started last fall?
Last October.
So almost a year in.
Yep.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I mean, and talk about making an impact in something that made such a big impact in your life. Your dad convinces you that saxophone is going to get you more girls. So you go there and you only take one private-ish lesson to get your mouthpiece situated the right way. And from there, then it was through more of the public school band classes. But these are private lessons for students up in Fort Wayne.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep.
Man, have you heard any crazy? 1 year in the first season, let's say.
Oh, we've had so many. I mean, I hear from parents all the time. We have concerts and recitals, and we have workshops, and specialists come in. We had a young fellow that, in fairness, he already had a lot of talent, but he did spend his last year with us. He just went to Carnegie Hall. He was one of 2 bass players from the whole country of the United States. One of the best young. He's a 16-year-old sophomore or junior in high school.
From Fort Wayne.
From Fort Wayne. Went and he played bass for a short while with the Count Basie Band, a very famous band, and then he was chosen to go to New York City and do a 3-week tour down in the Dominican Republic and New York, and just so many stories like that.
You think about legacy. It'd be really, really interesting to see how many careers in music stem from Fort Wayne. As you go on. And it's like, let's say 30 years from now, these kids, you've been giving out music lessons to anyone who, is going to put in the effort up there in northeastern Indiana. It'd be really fun to track and see how many people end up and how many venues have stemmed from that. That'd be really cool.
I can look back now and already see what we've done. We have 2,800 employees at Sweetwater. And many of them have gone on to do their own recording studios or nightclubs or other businesses. And so it's been just incredibly inspiring to see the success of others.
Talk to us about some of the other things that you're working on. Obviously, 20 businesses, all based in Northeast Indiana?
Not all. I have one up in northern Michigan on the west side of Lake Michigan, about 2 hours north of Green Bay, called Instrom Helicopters. We actually manufacture helicopters. So I bought this.
This is like a passion of yours, is aviation and helicopters.
Aviation is a passion that I've grown in the last, 15 years or so.
Why?
I don't know. I had a friend that flew into a little air show with his personal helicopter. And I said, that's really cool. And he says, well, you ought to do that. And I said, no, I'm 50. I'm too old. He says, no. I have a friend that did it in his 60s. And I said, really? So I went home and worked on my wife. And that Christmas, I got an FAA logbook and how to fly helicopters. And but the next year, I started taking private lessons. And by August, I had my license. And so now I've flown literally all over the country.
In helicopters?
In helicopters. I've been to California and back twice. I've been up into Canada, up New Hampshire. I take one to Florida every winter, for off and on for months. And I've been everywhere but the Northwest. I've not been Northwest, but I landed in the Rocky Mountains at 12,500 feet, got out and walked around, saw fresh animal dung about the size of a softball. I finally decided it must have been a bear, so I jumped back in the helicopter and took off. I saw hundreds of horses running wild, like you'd see on a picture or something. Just being able to see the earth in a way that you can't see in anything else is so fascinating.
I guess it started as a hobby, and now it's obviously you're working in business there, but it gets you around. How quick can you in a helicopter? How quick can you get from Fort Wayne to Indianapolis?
35 minutes.
35 minutes.
It makes going to the Colts or Pacers games quite a joy to get home right away.
That's so...
or the Indy 11.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, because you are also an investor in the Indy 11.
I am. Yes.
What are you a passionate soccer fan?
I couldn't spell soccer a couple years ago. But no, I've actually come to enjoy soccer. My daughter played a little soccer in high school, and And the opportunity to join the Indy 11 team was interesting to me. And my wife and I have become pretty good fans now.
That's awesome. We're going out to a game in a few weeks for the Oktoberfest.
Oh,
so
cool.
It'll be pretty fun. Well, this has been a huge piece. I feel like you've been in the news. There's been a lot of news out there over the past year and a half or so about Indy 11, about the heliport, about all these different things. I'd love to hear from your perspective. What's going on with the heliport and the Indy 11, and what got you so ingrained into what's going on with this?
Well, first off, let me say I want to be careful what I say, but I also am going to say the truth.
Yeah.
And so Indy 11, I give a lot of credit to Ursal for starting soccer in Indianapolis. Ursal's a developer, done a lot of cool stuff downtown, and I don't know how many years, 10, 11, 12 years ago, he acquired the Indy 11 or started the Indy 11 team, and it's grown. I mean, you go to a game, and there's now 10,000 people there.
It's one of in the league right below MLS, it's one of the more attended games.
It is.
One of the most attended teams.
Yeah, and it's actually a different franchise or a different thing than MLS, which that's where part of the controversy comes in. But clearly, Ursal has shown this community that there's room for soccer. And, we've got lots of other sports in Indianapolis, so I totally get it. And he started to build and design a big thing out in the property that he owns just west of where the Colts play. And so the mayor, Hogsett, and the governor then all were at this press conference and said, yep, let's build this project. And it was going to be $1.5 billion project with hotels and all kinds of, it was going to be just fascinating. 4 months later, Mayor Hogsett changed his mind and decided that he had an opportunity or hoped to have an opportunity to bring MLS to Indianapolis. And I'm all for MLS. I think that's great. I'd love to see, Major League Soccer here. But his idea was to build it over where the heliport is. And I just think the heliport is a great asset, not just for the city of Indianapolis, but for the whole state of Indiana. We haul lots of people in and out for various sporting events. We business people and politicians go from here to Fort Wayne or Evansville. And it's not just us using it. There's lots of other people using it. IU Health used it to do transfers. There's also a trend coming very, very soon called eVTOLs, electronic vertical takeoff and landing helicopters. These will be electric. Think about Tesla, if you will, for a helicopter.
Yeah.
And there's 200 companies around the world building these right now. They're all in beta or prototype stage, but within the next 12 months, they'll be licensed. And think about having a helicopter that could fly from downtown Indianapolis to Carmel in about 7 minutes, and it costs maybe a couple $100. In fact, just last week, Uber announced they've done a thing to do it in New York and LA. I mean, we're just that close. Well, Indianapolis already has a heliport that would serve as a vertiport or as an eVTOL operator so well. It's already set up with all the infrastructure and all that. And I just think it's sad that a short-term mayor, and again, I don't mean that disrespectful, but he's only going to be here a certain number of terms, has the ability to come in and decide to tear the heliport down when he could easily go back and build that stadium back on the Diamond Chain site just west of where the Colts play. And that's where the stadium should be. And the other thing about soccer, and MLS is great, and maybe Indianapolis should have an MLS team, but the league that we're in with Indy 11 is actually bigger around the rest of the world. Just in the United States, MLS is bigger, but in the rest of the world, the league we're in is bigger, and they've just announced a level that is MLS level.
A couple of things to dive into there. Because this is the thing in New York. It's called Blade. Have you heard
That's right.
of it?
Yep.
Where it'll like zip you around in a helicopter for, X amount of money. And
So Blade and Uber just got together, and they've announced that they're going to have these helicopters or eVTOLs in the next year or so.
And so that would be like is it manned or unmanned?
They'll be manned initially, and then eventually they'll be unmanned.
Wow.
I'm not sure when I'm ready to fly in an unmanned, but definitely manned for a while.
Yeah. What's the, have you been out to like Arizona where they have the Waymos?
Yes.
Those are crazy.
Yeah.
Okay, so this all comes out. They're talking about moving the stadium literally on the side of where the heliport is. And I think that you might have gotten a little bit of caught in the crosshairs of this a little bit
because,
as the helicopter aficionado of the state, and they're like, blah, blah. But if you think through both sides, one, it is very nice to be able to zip down there and go to a Pacers game. But also, if you had a little bit of looking into the future, having a heliport in downtown Indianapolis for vertical takeoff could be beneficial of helping connect our city and modernize it a little bit.
New York City's figured this out. Miami's figured it out. Dallas, LA, all these big successful cities have heliports in their downtown area. And when you think about Indianapolis trying to be, not trying, but being a world-class city and having all this world-class sports, these are the kind of things that owners and managers and people look at. What kind of infrastructure do we have? And the answer to get from the international airport to downtown, that's a 20, 25-minute thing, depending on traffic and all that. And I can get right downtown with a helicopter.
Yeah.
And that infrastructure is already there. That's the killer. They spent millions and millions of dollars putting that concrete in there years ago. Federal money came to support it. And I just don't understand how a mayor can just decide to take out what the federal people had put in.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I think that some people will see this and be like, it's not relevant to me. Like,
yeah, it's a rich boy's toy.
Sure.
I
think that some people, but what I'll say is that, like, how long ago was the thought of an autonomous driving car picking you up at the airport in Phoenix and driving you 20 minutes away to your Airbnb, to your vacation home that someone else owns, that you're going to be there for a week.
Absolutely.
Like we just did this when we were out in Scottsdale, and it's like, I can see currently, if you're stuck in this, if you sit in this space of what is today, like, yes, today a heliport in downtown Indianapolis is probably, I don't know, there's a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 people that's going to really affect them. But if you fast forward 10, 20 years, maybe 10 years, stuff's moving pretty fast now, this could be like an accessible piece that makes Indianapolis, we go from everything is 20 minutes away. Yeah, well, how far away is that? 20 minutes. It's a 20-minute drive, to, okay, there's this future of public-ish transportation that we've constantly been trying to figure out, from buses to, I don't know, whatever it is. I mean, there used to be a rail system here. There's a lot of crazy, interesting things.
We could have both. We could have an MLS-style stadium, whether it's the MLS franchise or we're the Indy 11 franchise. That could be at the Diamond Chain site and have a big fancy stadium and have 20,000 people. That would be awesome. And still have the heliport, which would support everything else going on in Indy. I don't know why we just don't want both.
Yeah. It's interesting. Well, I know it's been in the news a bunch of just everything with the Diamond Chain site and with all the stuff. And it's, a little bit, I'm sure there's just a lot that goes into it. And it is interesting to see from government to private, like all these different entities that are all getting involved in this, and to just hear from perspectives on what we can do. I think at the end of the day, what everyone in the state of Indiana wants, I would hope, or everyone in the city of Indianapolis, is to continue taking strides to make our city the best it can possibly be. And if we're seeing on one side that vertical, say it again, eVTOLs?
eVTOL, electronic vertical takeoff and landing.
Yeah. Like, I think that this is popular because we're seeing this in big cities.
Absolutely.
We're seeing Blade be a thing. And if you're not sure, look it up. And then on the other side, we are seeing that there's a huge presence of soccer fans here. So helping find something that builds, that doesn't sacrifice today for the future, but also helps, build another property that we're all proud of. Interesting. Wow, that's fun. As we kind of wrap up here, we have a few fun rapid fire questions. I literally think I could talk to you for the next 10 hours, but unfortunately, we are coming close on time. When they go back and play this specific episode 100 years from now, what do you hope people think, feel about Chuck Surack and Sweetwater 100 years from now?
Well, first off, in 100 years, I hope the technology still works. You think about going back, tape recorders that were analog, they don't work anymore. You think about wire recorders before that. So I'm not sure where digital technology will be in 100 years. But, there were a lot of things we didn't get to talk about today, our philanthropy, the stuff we do to support and grow Fort Wayne. I hope people remember me from that. That we've made the community better, the state better than we found it.
If you could snap your fingers and fix something or create something, or if it just happened overnight, what would be the one thing in Northeast Indiana that you would change?
Yeah, sadly, it's in Northeast Indiana, it's in Indianapolis, it's all over the country. I would fix homelessness. Any one of us could be one incident, one accident, one health scare away from being in that situation. And, I know there's mental health issues, there's all kinds of issues, but we live in the greatest country in the world, and we should all be able to have food and all be able to have, a roof over our heads.
Yeah.
And I wish I could solve that.
Amen. I totally agree with you there. This next question is brought to you by our friends at JC Hart. They're a leader in creating enjoyable living experiences at apartment communities all across Indiana and beyond. Check them out at homeisjchart.com. My question for you, Chuck, I'm sure as all the success you end up selling a large majority of your company, you could retire to the south of France. You could live in Miami. You could live in Los Angeles. But why do you call Indiana home?
Oh, I love Indiana. Everything about it. The quality of people that you talked about before, the work ethic is incredible. I love the 4 seasons. I mean, I have spent time in other parts of the country, but I think our 4 seasons are just beautiful. And as soon as you start to get a little tired or sick of one, the next one around the corner is more beautiful than the one before. But I'd say it's the people. You know, I've owned companies all over the country, actually, and I just love the quality of the people in our state.
Amen. It is interesting. The first snow or the first spring day or the first summer day or the first of it just like brings this newfound appreciation.
Yeah, that's true.
I love it. That hits the nail on the head. Okay, we're going to hit some rapid fire quick questions here. Who's your favorite Hoosier musician of all time?
You could go way back and say Hoagie Carmichael, but frankly, I think I would probably say John Cougar Mellencamp. You know, I just loved all his music. Maybe it's because when I grew up, 80s, he was really popular.
Did he ever come up and record anything at Sweetwater?
No, but a lot of his band members have, and I've been around his group quite a bit. But,
Heck yeah. That would be a fun one. What's the best concert you've ever attended?
I'm a huge Tower of Power fan, and so I've been to many, many Tower of Power concerts. A band out of San Francisco, been around for 57, 58 years. But maybe the best was seeing ZZ Top in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Probably one of the first concerts I went to. They are a three-piece band, and they rocked our Coliseum with such clarity that was just unbelievable. Some of the best sound I've ever heard in one of my first concerts.
Well, for those of you looking at home, you'll notice that Chuck's got his blazer on because every girl's crazy about a sharp-dressed man. Come on.
That was good.
Hey, there we go. I can put them together sometimes. Where's your favorite spot to relax around Fort Wayne?
Well, I have a lake cottage about 40 minutes north of Fort Wayne, but Fort Wayne's just like Indianapolis. There's so many great things in our community. We have a great park system. I love doing that. Just all kinds of things.
If you're grabbing dinner in Fort Wayne, where do we need to go?
Well, we opened a new restaurant last Thanksgiving called Amore. So Amore is a high-end Italian steak and seafood, but it's very approachable in price and that sort of thing. But it's in our downtown district. It's probably one of the nicer restaurants in town. But again, we're blessed with some fabulous restaurants in our community, just like you are here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This would have been maybe 4 years ago, I had lunch. Is it called Talon?
Tolan, right around the corner from us. Yeah,
Tolan?
Great restaurant.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
This was like an early. I feel like farm to table wasn't as popular as it is now.
No, they were one of the first. Yeah.
So good. I still think about that lunch from 6 years ago, maybe.
Tolan is their last name reversed, so their last name is Nolet. And so, yeah, great people, great company.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I got to hear the whole podcast you did with St. Elmo's. Just fascinating history, fascinating story. I mean, obviously one of my favorite restaurants in the whole world, and to hear his whole background. And I had no idea his father had done Noble Romans. When I was high school age, Noble Romans was so popular and so good, and I miss it all the time.
Isn't that kind of crazy to go from Noble Romans to St. Elmo's Steakhouse?
Greatness. All it is greatness.
You know what I appreciated about this conversation with you, as well as my conversation with Craig. So obviously, selling the majority stake of Sweetwater had to be hard and very, very challenging for like personal,
Sure.
like your personal ego and personal, just like you built this thing from
It was my baby.
nothing.
It was my baby.
But when you're building something to last the test of time, like you end up becoming, Craig says it as he's a steward of the brand.
True.
Like St. Elmo Steakhouse will be here. I think the direct quote is like, it was here before I got here, and it'll be here long after I'm gone. And in this moment of time, I get to be a steward of this. And what you do is you give the opportunity for Sweetwater to be bigger than Chuck.
That's what I want.
Yeah. And I think that is insightful. I think a lot of times certain individuals can build these spectacular things, but it becomes hard for them to run and operate after they're gone. So I think that takes a lot of self-awareness. And I think that very, very great leaders, such as yourself and such as Craig, are able to see that and see the whole forest instead of just the trees in front of them.
I've been so impressed how Craig has protected that brand. I know you talked about that, but he has. He's made St. Elmo's just beyond reproach, regardless of everything else going on in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It is just the place.
And the easy thing to do today, the easy thing is to open up 50 of them.
Yeah, right.
They would do pretty well in every major metro, but the fact that he doesn't makes the one here just. It's just lore, right?
Yep.
I love it. I'm pumped that you listened to that one. That one's a really good one. And he is another individual that's so approachable. I think you think, oh, St. Elmo, like it's going to be this, like, and it's no. He's like a very normal person.
Yes, he is.
Who's cares about the community, and oh my gosh, it's so great. The piece of gear that changed your life was the Kurzweil K250. Today, what's your favorite piece of gear that you own?
You know, it's hard to not love an iPhone. The iPhone is just so, I mean, yeah, you can talk on it, but it's a computer in your hand. Who would have envisioned you could have a computer in your hand, whether it's looking up information or storing information, pictures, family. It is just so ubiquitous today. I think an iPhone would have to be it.
Isn't it crazy? And it's just been adopted by like everyone.
Yep.
It's totally wild. I just got the new AirPods that are supposed to have live translation. I'm very eager to see how that works. I'm going to South America in the spring.
Ooh.
And I'm curious to walk around and have those on. And, and I can hear everyone talking smack about me. And that'll be funny. When you have someone, a prestigious guest visiting Fort Wayne from wherever they may be from, like what would you put on the itinerary? What are the things you have to be sure to take them through so they understand the DNA, the fabric of Northeast Indiana?
Oh, there's so many things. And I am fortunate. I get to bring a lot of people to Fort Wayne and give them tours. We could talk about the Embassy Theater. We could talk about our park system. Yeah. Our arts are really strong. You know, it's a combination of the Clyde Theater that I own, the now Pearl Street Arts, Arts United, I say the Embassy. And we have so much live music in our community. And partly because we have 2,800 employees at Sweetwater, more than half of them we've relocated to Fort Wayne. Many of them play instruments or play music, or their spouses play. And so our churches have phenomenal music. It's just a really rich culture artistically.
Yeah, I don't know if people think about the like second or third degree effects that bringing 1,400 music fanatics from across the country to Northeast Indiana does. Yeah, church and live music on Thursday nights down the street at the bar. Like I'm sure, and their spouses, all of these like music. Yeah, fanatic. I love that. Those are like those second degree things that I didn't really think about. Is there a specific, like, if you had to pin, is there like, who's the coolest person you've brought to Fort Wayne that you're like, I can't believe that so and so's in Fort Wayne?
You know, we don't normally talk about names, but we get the biggest of the biggest names will come to see Sweetwater. I mean, it becomes a mecca where they come from all over the country, all over the world. Just this last week, we had a great band called Leonid and Friends. They've become good friends. They're from Russia and Ukraine, and they do Chicago music. You have to look them up. Leonid and Friends. And they do Chicago music probably better today than Chicago does because, you know, a lot of the original members of Chicago are no longer with the band. And they do all kinds of music like that. I had Vice President Mike Pence up just a few weeks ago, gave him a tour of the Pearl Street Arts. And,
that's wild.
It's just a lot of fun.
Man, that's so cool. Yeah, and I've heard some, because you have a full like floating studio up there, right? Mm-hmm. Is that, I don't know if that's the right terminology for it. I walked in, that was crazy cool to just think about the legacy and history there. And that one concert venue, it's like a smaller venue that can make it sound like you're anywhere. Like you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and you clap and it like reverberates. It's like, that's so crazy. You have some really, and the 3D sound modeling studio that's up there. That's also crazy cool. I love it. Again, I've said it all day. I could talk to you. We have 3 questions left for you. These are the same 3 questions that we ask every guest who comes on the show. First, you've been around. You've obviously flown a helicopter to California twice. You've seen a lot of things, tops of mountains, down on the beaches, seen the world. But what is something that the world needs to know about Indiana?
Well, the world needs to know that we're not a flyover state, and there are so many great things that are happening here, whether it's at a personal level or an entrepreneurial level. There's just a whole bunch of people who really, really care, and we're making a difference. We're really making a difference. When you think about, you know, Warsaw being the orthopedic capital of the world, or the kind of stuff that's happening at IU Bloomington from a music point of view, and it's just a great state and great people here.
Yeah, I could not agree more. The people really met, and I'm sure that you get that feedback too as you bring in more, as you brought in a ton of people that didn't grow up here, that they relocated up to Fort Wayne, and they're like, oh wow, people here are really nice. Like this,
I hear that all the time.
The Hoosier hospitality thing is not a joke.
I tell them it's our water.
Amen. Now this is where you get to shed some light on a place or a thing within the state that not enough people are talking about. What is a hidden gem in Indiana?
We're a state with a lot of lakes, and something about water, just going out, whether you own it, whether you just visit it, there are lakes in every county in this state, and to go relax in front of one just takes the world away for a minute. And so I love our lakes.
Something about the water sure is sweet.
Yeah, very good.
What's your favorite lake?
Well, we have a place on Lake James,
Yeah.
which is the second largest lake in northern Indiana, and I've been there my whole life. My
What's
grandparents.
the town that's by? Is
Angola.
That Angola.
Angola.
Okay. There's a bunch up there. I'm originally from just west of Warsaw.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Triton High School, grew up in Bourbon.
Sure.
But we have friends over in like Tippy and Wawasee and
sure.
Syracuse. Those are pretty good. But then there's this whole other pocket that's like up more northeast. Is it like Lake Gage, Lake James? Like there's a bunch up there that are also really, really great lakes.
Yep.
Not Great Lakes, but Great Lakes.
But they're all over. I mean, you go down to Bloomington and you got Monroe, and just all these great lakes all over the state.
Amen. Final question. This is where we find out about new guests or just learn other people from Indiana that are doing crazy cool things. Who's a Hoosier that we need to keep on our radar? Someone who's doing big things.
The few that I would think of, and these guys get kind of a bad rap, but I think what Dennis Murphy is doing at IU Health is unbelievable. They're building a $4 billion building or something, but it's not about the building. It's about the lives that they will take care of. They serve sometimes the worst of the worst, the kind of hospitals or the kind of people that are so sick that they have to come to Indianapolis. So I think that's amazing. In Fort Wayne, I would say Mike Packnett, who ran Parkview Hospital for a long time. Again, Parkview's doing some fascinating stuff. And then a good friend, Brian Bauer, who's building the IU Health Hospital in Fort Wayne. He was at Lutheran before that. A great entrepreneur, very fascinating man. Also a fellow owner of the Indy 11. But those three men who get a lot of heat because of what healthcare costs and all that, I think of the alternative. What if we didn't have the healthcare? I mean, I don't want to pay the expenses any more than anybody else does, but I'm so glad that we have that level of medical care in our state.
Yeah. Those are good. We need to do something. We just had someone on from the Indy Health District, which is the area around there. And it's fascinating the level of detail that IU Health is putting in to benefit the community around them. Because it is a very historic, like low income neighborhood and not necessarily the best access to healthcare in that specific neighborhood that it's going into. And the community outreach that they're doing is pretty impressive.
All those healthcare facilities are doing things like that. They don't get credit for all the nonprofit work they do. They also don't get credit that so many of their patients can't pay, and so they take care of them.
Yeah, or like the system is just really interesting in general because it's a constant battle between like the insurance as we're not paying that and blah, blah, blah. And they just like argue back and forth and then eventually they settle on something and it's above my pay grade. But
it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah.
But I'm just thankful they're there.
Yeah. Chuck, this has been spectacular. Thank you so much for coming on Get In and teaching us a little bit about your journey from Ohio. We won't hold that against him, but into Northeast Indiana, the impact that you've made in Fort Wayne by not only growing Sweetwater, but the arts impact. I mean, you're educating the youth of Northeast Indiana for free, giving them opportunities to pick up an instrument. Because truthfully, when we narrow down this whole entire story, your life was changed the moment you picked up a saxophone.
Absolutely.
And again, we talked about like your love for the Kurzweil K250, your love for software and learning the tech side of it all stemmed from your teacher turning that mouthpiece over and like getting you on this path of music and your willingness. Obviously, there's a lot of luck in there. There's a lot of hard work, late nights, early mornings. Like I'm not trying to discredit any of that or anything like that. But what I'm really, really inspired by is you found this love of music as a fifth grader. And you have grown that over, now 47 years in the company space. But again, 5 years touring before that, like all this crazy, amazing opportunity all came from you picking up an instrument.
Yeah, and I would also like to say that it's all about the educators. There are unsung heroes. What these teachers, educators, administrators are doing, they are creating and pouring into these young people for our future. And they just don't get paid enough. They don't get enough respect. I love our teachers.
Yeah. And yeah, that's another very unsung role. Yeah. Man, I am just fired up after this one. It's an honor. I think a lot of people may have heard of Sweetwater, This is you're such an approachable guy to talk to. I appreciate you coming down and telling us a little bit about the story. If people want to get plugged into any of the stuff that you're doing now, if they want to keep up with you or any of the updates, what can they do?
Well, they can go to our website, Surack.com, and that's Surack.com. They can even write me emails. I respond to every email, so it's Chuck.
He does. This is true. You could ask him to be on your podcast, and he might say yes.
Chuck@Surack.com, and I'll respond to every email.
Heck yeah. I have just been blown away in this conversation. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you for coming on the show, but thank you for what you're doing to push Indiana forward. I think that the story of being willing to chase down your passion and to just keep going, I think that's very, very inspiring. I think today in this younger internet generation, we think that, we're just going to grow $1 billion enterprise overnight. And to hear about, it takes a long time and takes a lot of hard work, early mornings, late nights, being willing to chase down. And the less motivated that we can be by money, somehow maybe the more you'll end up getting in the long run. Who knows? So appreciate you. Thank you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.
This show is made possible by our friends up at Sweetwater. Whether you're looking to start a podcast or take your content to the next level, click the link in the description to see all my gear recommendations at Sweetwater. If you want a behind-the-scenes look at everything we're doing across the state, make sure you follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Nate Spangle. Thank you so much for listening and being a part of what makes the Hoosier State great. We'll see you next time here on Get In.